5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hey space enthusiasts, my guest this time is Chloé Carriere, a fellow space communicator, who is, among other things, the host of the Galactic Chloé show on YouTube. We talk about all things space communications. Just as a reminder, if you enjoy this podcast, please leave us a review or rating on your favorite podcast platform so more people can find the podcast. Thank you. Now here are a couple of short messages from our sponsors, and then please enjoy my conversation with Chloé. My name is Raphael Rodkin, and I'm an investor and advisor to space companies. Just as a reminder, this podcast is for informational purposes only, and nothing should be taken as investment advice. This podcast is sponsored by Nano Avionics, a satellite manufacturer and mission integrator. Their technologies enable many space companies worldwide to offer services that improve life right here on Earth, such as providing global connectivity, conducting Earth observation, or contributing to scientific discoveries. Check them out, and also check out my episode with their CEO and co-founder. Sadly, I am not a rocket scientist, but I'm an alumnus of the International Space University. ISU offers a number of educational programs about space worldwide. Check them out at isunet.edu. Hi, so today I'm here with Chloé Carriere from EPFL, the university in Switzerland. And Chloé is a space communicator, but she's going to tell us all about it. Hi, Chloé.
Hi, Raphael. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm very happy we're having a Swiss guest again. I should really be having some more Swiss guests, given that I'm most of the time based in Switzerland. And I spent a lot of time at your university, EPFL, as well. But Chloé, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
So in a nutshell, I'm still a student at EPFL doing management of technologies with a focus in space technologies. And I am the president of Space at Your Service, a nonprofit organization that aims at doing promotion of space.
Okay, so let's talk about a few of these things you mentioned there. So you're a space and science communicator. How did that start? How did you decide that you want to become a space communicator?
Oh, wow. What a story. Actually began when I was 15 and I learned about space in general. I was not the kind of person who was passionate about space since I was little. It came way after that when I was a high school student. And I learned about this mission from the European Space Agency, the Planck mission that aims at doing, the first picture of the universe, so right after the Big Bang. When I learned about this, I really thought, wow, space is amazing. There's so much we don't know. I want to work in space. And then the next step was that I discovered that so many people don't know how fascinating it is. And so I started being passionate about sharing this passion and not only passionate about space.
How did you decide? So we'll talk about this, but right now you have basically a video show, I think, which is called the Galactic Chloé show. Very cool name, by the way, and it's available, for example, on YouTube. How did you decide to choose this format? And talk a little bit about how the design of the show, how you decided to do, like, for example, a video format, and how you're choosing your guests and the topics and so forth.
So the show started about a year ago, and at first I was doing more live presentations and organizing events. But then, COVID happened, and I started thinking about how to go virtual. And I talked with the EPFL Communication Services, and we wanted to develop a new format that would attract students, but also more people in the general public to get interested about science, but also the people who do science. And this is really something that we're trying to do at the Galactic Chloé show is, so basically we're doing 15 minutes video with one or a couple of guests in the scientific field, be it professors or students. And we talk about what they do, but also why they do it. And the setting is what we call the EPFL Lunar Campus. So we imagine that EPFL 50 years ago, as the first man stepped on the moon, came with the NASA program and established the first campus on our satellite. And we invite guests from Earth to come and visit us and tell us more about their research.
Mm-hmm. And just for our listeners who may not be aware, so EPFL is a university in Lausanne in Switzerland, and it's basically one of two of the Swiss institutes of technology, the other one being in Zurich. And I think it's fair to say both of them are ranked among the top universities in the world, and Lausanne actually has I think it's a space minor, right? Or what is the exact program?
Yes, exactly. So we do not have a complete major or a master, but you can do your minor in space technologies. It's co-organized by the PFL Space Center and the Space Innovation.
Okay, and so it seems like this started sort of within EPFL, sort of transitioning from live events, as you said, towards online events during COVID. But is it fair to say that now you're targeting a much broader audience than just the EPFL community?
Totally. At first, the show was more, for EPFL students, but now we're trying to reach out for more people. And for instance, our latest episode was with Professor Michel Mayor, who won the Nobel Prize of Physics in 2019. Who was not an EPFL alumni, and it was with the Chloé Carriere, or Swiss astronauts. And this episode was much more directed towards a broader audience.
Okay, and in terms of talking about a broader audience, it's kind of interesting. I mean, here at the Space Business Podcast, it's also basically our objective to reach an audience that's not just let's call it the existing space community. And I always joke, like, the existing space community is actually not very big. It's sort of like, maybe a few thousand people, and you meet them at all of the big conferences like IAC. But really, what we're trying to do, and it sounds like probably you're trying to do as well, is trying to reach beyond that and explain space to people who are not yet part of the community, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It started with do you know what Astronomy on Tap is? Have you ever heard of that?
I don't have a bit. It sounds interesting if the tap part refers to drinks.
Yeah, exactly. It's at first, I think it's an American event that was born in New York. And when I started doing science communication, I joined this international team that basically organized outreach events in bars to talk about astronomy and astronautics in general. And the aim was really to, instead of bringing the public to the science, like doing, for instance, open doors in universities. It was more bringing the science to the public directly. So going, for instance, in bars where people who go there maybe not so much interested about space, and have scientists discussing what they're doing around nice beer.
This sounds really interesting. And so this has been around in various places for a while, you're saying? Yes,
I think we have now like 40 different cities around the world who do that. For sure, with COVID, it has been difficult, but it's really an amazing event. And if you have the occasion to go, it really, I think, one of the things that got me into science communication for real.
So it's called Astronomy on Tap?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And do you know, so I assume there are locations worldwide and people can look it up on the internet, just out of curiosity. So are there locations in Switzerland too?
Yeah, so there's one in Bern. That's the first one I went to, and I created the one in Lausanne.
Okay.
And I think there is a team interested in launching that in Zurich.
Very interesting. I mean, I'd love to see that. I mean, I must admit, I haven't heard of it, and it sounds like at first glance, sort of a funny thing. It's sort of you go to the bar and instead of the live band or the karaoke or the football game, it's astronomy, but I love it. Speaking of sort of like audience, audience feedback, it's a nice way to transition to that. I mean, have you had any feedback from your audience, sort of like comments, what they think about the show, what they like, any interesting suggestions?
So until now, we've been reaching, I think, 1,000 to 2,000 people per episode, something like that. So it's still small, and I have the ambition to make it bigger by developing different formats during the next year. Because as of now, we have feedback from people from the scientific community who absolutely love it, because they get to discover the people behind the research, and also people from the student community who really like to see their professors, for instance, from another point of view, like a professor who is doing epidemiology who loves to do pizza on Sundays. I mean, that's the kind of things that make our professors more human and more accessible. And for the general public, I do have a few feedback, but I think that my format needs to be developed in the coming year, because it's still a long format, 15 to 20 minutes. And I'd like to do also shorter ones to target more the general public.
So sort of along the, maybe as short as like the TikTok type videos?
No, I'm not a fan of TikTok videos and having something so short. But I mean, you need to find just the right timing, something that is long enough so you can actually explain and bring something valuable, but short enough so that people who are not interested in science will actually watch it.
Yeah, I guess TikTok is really usually too short to kind of communicate any sort of interesting concept. But let me maybe ask you the other way around then. Sort of, so besides your own show, like what may be some places that you like to go to for, space news, education, that type of thing?
So you mean like a physical place?
No, well, it could be physical places, I guess, like the Astronomy on Tap. But I mean, even like, other shows, podcasts, YouTube channels, that kind of thing.
So in general, I'm mostly on social media and YouTube. So it's a YouTube channel. And what I like to develop is shorter videos, so more YouTube style. And so explaining things in maybe like 5 minutes or so. Or meeting people in their environment, because until now the show is, as I say, located in this virtual lunar environment, and actually meeting people in the laboratory or in their environment is something that I like to do. And so it could be like an introductory video, and if you want to know more, go take a look at the Galactic Chloé show, because you get to meet the person in depth, for instance.
Okay, and people can probably just easily find that by searching for Galactic Chloé on YouTube, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so you've been speaking about some of your guests, so let's talk a little bit about some basically past and potential future episodes. So how many episodes have you done so far?
We've done 12 until now.
Okay, and so what have been some of your favorite or most interesting or maybe most surprising moments during those episodes?
I really loved shooting the one with the EPFL president, Martin Vitali. I think because it's a figure at the university the president of the university seems so inaccessible, and it's the person sending you email to get vaccinated, right? You don't know the person behind that. And meeting him and talking about not only being a president, but the research he's doing, I felt like I was meeting a totally new person. And it was very interesting to talk about how it is to work in university administration when you're actually passionate about research. And it's the way our universities work, right? It's always professors that get, for instance, the head of a faculty or head of a university, and how they manage to do both. It's really interesting.
Yeah, I must admit, I probably know quite a few who they see the administrative side as a distraction to their research, which I sympathize with. I mean, you have to admire the people who actually manage to do both in a good way. So that does sound like an interesting episode. So looking towards the future, who would be some of your sort of dream guests and why?
That's a hard one. I mean, I've already had so many amazing guests, from professors to students to real astronauts, a Nobel Prize, and it's not really the title that makes the great episode. It's really the person behind, and if the person is willing to share. I would love to have a great science communicator coming to my show, someone who is not only interested in doing his research, but sharing, to also have his point or his or her point of view on that aspect of science that we do not talk about so much.
Can you think of examples of such great science communicators that you admire?
Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson is, of course.
Yeah, sure. That's the standard one, yes.
But I still got to follow someone someone who's a bit like my profile. She did her study at MIT, and her name is Space Girl. She's in the US as well.
Oh, is that Emily Calandrelli? Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
And I think her profile is also amazing, and how she's involved with kids. And that's someone I would love to interview.
She has that show now with like the science show for kids, right? I think on Netflix.
Netflix, yes, exactly.
I think Emily's Wonder Lab. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. There's like now that you mentioned it, there's a few sort of interesting personalities. I guess the other one that's sort of very active on social media, and I think is even supposed to fly now on Virgin Galactic, is Kelly Girardi.
True. I mean, it's those types of personalities also that the general public is attracted to, because they make science intriguing, and that's what I admire with them. And what I'm still actually learning is really how to get the attention of the public, and how to merge humor with science, so it is just attractive to them.
Yeah. So I think some of the people we talked about, I guess they probably started as communicators and then they sort of moved into real life, even going to space, like it may happen with Kelly Girardi. Can you think of people who are sort of going the other way? So people who are maybe great scientists or astronauts, and you think they're just really great communicators? I mean, leaving aside Neil deGrasse Tyson, we just already talked about.
Well, in my surroundings, Chloé Carriere, so the only Swiss astronaut, is for me a great science communicator. Because, I mean, one example and the best example for me is, I think I've heard his story and him talking about space missions like maybe 60 or 70 times now. Mm-hmm. And every time I hear it, I'm always that inspired. And I'm always, it's like the first time I'm hearing the story. And that's for me one of the best things to have as a science communicator.
Yeah. I'm sure you follow, the other one I think is great as an astronaut right now is the French one, Thomas Pesquet.
Of course.
I think he's doing a great job. I mean, he seems to really have fascinated a lot of people, not only in France, but also like around Europe, sort of get them excited about what they're doing International Space Station and at ESA. But by the way, did you, we just, our international listeners outside of Europe may not be aware, but basically we just had an astronaut selection application in Europe for ESA. Did you apply for that?
No, unfortunately, I'm too young.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'm still a master's student. So, you need to have a master's degree and then at least 3 years of experience. And unfortunately, I don't have that. But I worked with ESA and actually did an episode for promotion of this selection in Switzerland and to attract more women and more diversity in this selection.
Yeah, I think that worked out, right? Because if I remember the statistics, they got quite a few female applicants this time.
Yeah, they do. And even if you take a look at the Parastronauts feasibility project, so now they're selected also people with handicaps, and I think they have a few hundred applicants on that too. Okay.
Anything else interesting you learned about the astronaut application process when you researched that and did the episode with ESA?
I think ESA did a tremendous job on this selection because I think the last one we had about 8,000 applicants and now we're 22,000 applicants. It's huge and so many people have heard about it, and actually many people that I know I've tried it and they were not so much interested in space at the beginning. And I think what I loved and what I learned about this selection is really how they try to be as inclusive as possible. It was really inclusiveness was one of the key words for this year.
Yeah, and again, I only briefly glanced at the statistics, but it really seemed like it was, not only sort of like the male versus female mix being probably much better than historically, but it seemed like just really from many, like all of the European countries that could apply basically applied, which is great. And then you said the handicap program, that's of course a very interesting new element as well. Okay, so you couldn't apply this time. I mean, this won't be the last ESA selection, so hopefully next time they open it up, you'll be able to apply. But yeah, I mean, I should ask you, do you even want to go to space?
Of course. That's a dream. Since I discovered space since I was 15, I think again, and what I do every day and what I've been doing actually, all the projects, the science communication, it's with the dream of one day being able to go there. So really this dream of one day being an astronaut has brought me so many things and so many experiences. It's the dream is not going there, but it's really the way that brings you there. And that's why I think it's just one of the most wonderful dreams you can have.
And so in what you mentioned the way, in what way would you like to go there, and what would you like to do there? Because I guess it is, relatively speaking, as easy as never before to go to space, right? Because now we have the Virgin Galactic flights and the Blue Origin flights. There's on Virgin Galactic there's basically a raffle for some seats that people can participate in. We have the Inspiration 4 mission on the Crew Dragon, which is basically you're also a non-professional flight launching in a week. Wow, this is very soon. But I assume you probably don't mean going on a tourist flight. So in which way would you like to go to space?
No, for sure. I'd love to be an astronaut in a sense, like contributing to science and humanity in space. So, of course, that's one of the hardest ways, right? As you mentioned now, only if you can do that. But if I could get to be selected by ESA, that would be the dream. But again, you never know. It's true that, as you say, with this private space emerging, we will need more commercial astronauts. So if I get the opportunity, I'll probably apply to both. But the dream would be to go there as part of the European Space Agency.
Is there any type of specific research you're interested in, or any specific thing you would like to do up in space?
Well, going to the moon would be would be amazing.
Oh, you want to go to the moon? Okay, yeah, so that's next level. I was talking about the suborbital flights, then we're talking about a little bit orbital, but the moon. Okay, that's
the moon is the next step now, right? I mean, the ISS will be operating for maybe 4 to 8 years with the ESA, NASA, and the other space agencies, and then it's likely to go private. So if you want to follow the space agency's ambitions, you need to go further.
I guess that's fair, and that's probably for the foreseeable future. Like for tourism, that's going to be out of reach as well. Well, unless you're like the Japanese billionaire and you really pay a lot of money. Okay, so you stop at the moon, or would you go all the way to Mars?
And to be honest, I'm part of the people who think that I will not be seeing men on Mars, men or women on Mars. I think it's the next challenge is the moon, and we still have lots of things to figure out to go there and to stay there. And I think Mars still not it's too far away until now. Was too many challenges that we haven't figured out, and I'm 100% sure that we will, but I don't think I will be able to see it.
In your lifetime, you mean?
In my lifetime, yes, of course.
Oh wow! I really hope you're wrong on that one.
Well, I'm asking to be wrong. I would love to see it. It's just when you think about the resources that it amounts to go to the moon, right? Well, the Apollo program and the space race, and really the political will to go there, and what we're trying to do now with this international collaboration. That's already huge. Going to Mars, it's not the same trip, not the same environment. And when you actually think about it, only 2 space agencies have actually landed a rover on Mars. So if we cannot land rovers properly with a good probability, it's unlikely that we'll be sending men in the near future.
Okay, all right, let's unpack that. There's at least a couple of topics to talk about there. I guess the first thing I would say, maybe a little bit optimistically, and speaking as a shareholder, it seems the most likely shot we have to get humans to Mars right now is not governments, but a private company.
For sure. And we can see it. We can see the will, for instance, SpaceX with their Starship, who actually wants to aim for Mars.
Yes, and so of course, one of the good things is that it's not directly dependent on political will, as you mentioned. I guess it is indirectly dependent in that the company is still making a lot of revenue from government contracts, and that is very important. But let's talk about the political will for a moment as well, because and so political will, what I mean by this, and probably you as well, is sort of like general support by governments. But then, unless you are in a authoritarian country, then the support the governments give will be somewhere in the end driven by the support that the population at large sort of gives towards space, right? Because the politicians typically won't do something that's that they perceive too much against the will of the population. So we have this, I guess, ever since space exploration was around, beginning of the days of Apollo, there was always people who have protested against space being, like you said before, it takes a lot of resources, and that those resources may be able to be used in different ways on Earth. And I'm sure you also followed recently when we had the back-to-back flights, the suborbital flights by Richard Branson on Spaceship Two, and then Jeff Bezos on New Shepard. To some extent, I think it's fair to say there was quite a lot of backlash in the media. There were some relatively harsh articles being written, sort of. As a space communicator, and I can give you my view in a second as well, but how did you perceive that when you read some of those articles? What were some of your thoughts?
Well, actually, I kind of even talked with people, because to tell you a bit of the story, I was interviewed by the Swiss radio right after those 2 flights, and talking about the access to space, or is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And after this interview, I received a few angry emails talking about my point of view and the fact that they were really, really worried about the future of space exploration. So if I can give you my point of view, so we can maybe debate on that, is that for me, I basically said it's a good thing. It's a good thing because privatization of space had to happen. It's as we can see with the airplanes, etc. It had to happen, and it's good because it's getting access to people who want to go to space but cannot become astronauts, for instance. And it also brings lots and lots of money in the sector, developing new startups, developing a new economy. However, the one thing that we are missing are regulations, because it's true that we cannot be sending rockets and rockets to space without taking into account the environmental impact. And not only on Earth, but also the debris that we have around Earth. And those regulations we need to create now. And that's the thing that will make those touristic flights, I think, a good thing in the future.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I probably obviously agree with you. I think it's a good thing. Like you said, it brings a lot of additional resources to the space sector. It also kind of gathers a lot of attention onto the space sector so that, people who are not yet part of the community get more curious about it. The whole thing of billionaires flying, I mean, it's very common for new technologies to start being used by rich people, right? Whether that's jet planes or cell phones or computers or whatever. And the last point you brought up is an interesting one. The let's call it the carbon footprint of the chemical rockets we're using right now. So this is something, I don't know what your experience was, but let's say even definitely 2 years ago, but maybe even as recent as 1 year ago, I hardly ever, I think, heard about anybody commenting on that. And now it seems like, well, if not every week, then every 2 weeks, I'm at some, conference or event or online event, and somebody brings up the question, but what about the carbon footprint of the rockets? And but kind of taking those two together, I mean, don't you feel like these are examples that we just need more education on space, and just to make sure also that the general population doesn't fall into sort of easy criticism or easier stereotypes?
Yeah, for sure. And I think especially on this topic of the link between space and sustainability, because the general public really sees space as one of the most unsustainable industry. And when you actually compare it to other industries, like the chemical one on Earth, it's nothing. But also the research that we do in space can actually contribute to lots of sustainable aspects on Earth. So that's a thing that I like to bring up a lot when I do science communication. But I agree with you. It's a topic that has arisen maybe a couple of years ago. We weren't so much talking about it before.
Yeah. And now it seems like it's really increasingly important. And I mean, and it's a fair question that should be addressed. I just want to make sure we really, as a science communicator, as a space communicator community, that we really do address it. So people have the right information to basically work off. And like you said, there's important things to mention, like, for example, talk about the climate, like, well, the reason we can observe the climate is because we have satellites in space.
Okay. No, exactly. And it's even all the technologies that we use every day, most of them, almost a lot of them, come from space exploration research that we did during the Apollo program, the shuttle program of the ISS. And that's a thing that the general public doesn't know. And that's actually a great website. If you haven't seen it, I think it's called NASA Home. It's a website where you get to go around your house and see the objects that were developed for space exploration.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's really a very large array of objects. I mean, people won't even be aware, but things like the computer mouse and many other things. It's interesting. I forget now who told me this, but somebody had this idea of like, we should just take all of these objects and put like a sticker on them that says NASA inside. So it would be on people's mind how much stuff is actually coming from directly and indirectly from space research. But I mean, this is touching basically on a topic that we've sort of implicitly touched upon a few times already now, which is sort of how to really make sure that we communicate space to a really broad audience. and not this like limited existing space community, because while they're all great people and we love them, it's a very small community, and we really need to take the space message to the very broad community. Is there anything else that you think we can do, that we should be doing, to make sure that, you know, space is communicated to a really broad audience?
Well, I think that's one of the things that, as you mentioned, the touristic flights and the fact that we have large companies like Blue Origin or SpaceX, they do get a lot of media attention. So space is becoming more and more present even in the news, and people get more easily attracted to this field and wanting to know more. To really target a broad audience, I still think that the key word would be really bring the science to the people, because we need to find innovative ways to put the science where people don't expect it. I have another example, for instance. I did an internship at SwissNext San Francisco. And when I went there, I developed the concept of using an escape room. I don't know if you know what this is.
Yes, I have done those, yeah.
Okay, you've done those. And for instance, using escape rooms is becoming more and more famous, I guess, in Europe and in the US. Those are thrilling games where you get an hour to escape. And using this and putting science communication in those rooms. So for instance, you put actually prototypes of research in it. You design a scenario that is based on things that have actually happened. And this way, people can actually learn about space exploration without even knowing it. This is something that I got this idea when I was doing escape games with my family. And I'm like the one interested in space, so then they're not so interested. And we actually did a couple of those on the space topic. And every time I was doing it, I was like, that's so unrealistic. That would never happen. And we were discussing about the game afterwards, and my family was like, oh, you saw that? That's so cool. That's how it happens in space. And I was telling them no. And maybe there's something to do. Maybe we could develop tools like this so that people can have fun and learn about science in some way.
That's a really fun example. And just in case someone in the audience are not aware, so escape rooms, just a really quick explanation, is basically some sort of pretend setup where you're in a room, as the name implies. You may start out being handcuffed or tied to a chair or something. And then the door to the next room is locked. And basically you have to, again, as the name implies, escape, and all of the tools and clues and information you need is somewhere hidden in the room. But it takes a certain effort to basically get out. But Chloé, I think I saw like 1 or 2 years ago, there was even some group in France or some company or some people who were proposing to do a ISS, International Space Station, escape room. Do you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. I know there was a group of students who did like a do-it-yourself escape room on that subject, and I did it. That was great. That was really great. But I think that what we did with the Space Teacher Service, it's actually going out in 2 weeks or so, is we created an application on using augmented reality. So you can play it at home with augmented reality. It's the same topic, escape room, but you're using your phone to see the room.
Okay. Interesting. And you mentioned that you were annoyed that many times the rooms were not sort of, the space thematic was not done in a realistic way. That brings me to one of my favorite topics, and the one we usually sort of close up on, which is the science fiction. Do you also follow science fiction? And if yes, what are some of your favorites?
So you mean like movies or TV shows?
Movies or books or TV series, even video games. I mean, really anything.
Yeah, for sure. Well, science fiction now in movies is pretty much everywhere. What is one of my favorite? Well, Interstellar is one of my favorite space movies. In terms of TV shows, what did I watch? I think I watched Salvation on Netflix.
That's the one with the asteroid.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Exactly. And well, I mean, it's really enjoyable to watch science fiction. But for me, it's not the same it's not the same purpose. It's meant to interest the public, but it's not meant to be scientifically correct. If we actually did a movie that would be scientifically realistic, it would be maybe a bit boring.
So it's interesting. It's interesting, you mentioned Interstellar, right? Because if I can, off the top of my head, think of most science fiction movies, that's got to be one of the ones that is most correct. Mm-hmm. Because they really, for example, they really try to be correct about the effects of relativity and time dilation. They even got Kip Thorne, the Stanford astrophysicist, involved to design the black hole correctly and all of that. But I think you're probably right. If people try to be too realistic, then it may become boring or complicated for the audience.
But it's true, yeah. This movie especially, sorry, just to interrupt you. This movie especially, I know, was difficult to understand for a general public.
Interstellar.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's the same with books, right? I mean, we make this distinction between sort of like soft or normal science fiction, and then there's like, what we generally call hard science fiction. The hard science fiction is where supposedly the author, gets most of the let's say the physics, so to say, correct. And of course, the more you do that, it can become quite hard. I remember there's one, which I still haven't read, it's called Tau Zero by an author called Paulson. That's supposed to be the hardest science fiction there is. And if you go on Amazon, people actually complain that it's too difficult to understand.
I think there's you watched the movie The Martian, right?
Yes.
I think it's not 100% realistic, but the author of the book has worked with NASA engineers to actually write it.
No. So the scientific advisor to that was Dr. Jim Green, the chief scientist at NASA, who was actually on one of the previous episodes.
Nice.
Yes. and still, so that people are complaining about The Martian too, because then of course it's not 100%, but then I think it's basically what you're saying. People are trying to strike a balance between, getting some of the science right, but also not making it too onerous to watch. Chloé, I forgot to mention, you actually recently also got chosen by the International Astronautic Federation as an emerging space leader. So first of all, congratulations. And second, what does that mean?
Thank you, Raphael. So this is a program by the International Astronautical Federation, as you said, to attend the IAC in Dubai in October. And so I applied to this program as a young emerging space leader, because you need to be between 21 and 35, and to contribute to space exploration in your field, in your country, or at an international scale. And we were 25 chosen, and we will all be coming to Dubai in October to present our work at the IAC.
Fantastic. As will I. So I shall see you there at the IAC, the big conference, and I hope there's going to be a Yuri's Night as well. Yuri's Night, probably most listeners know, this is a sort of very famous space-themed party that's taking place every year on the anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's flight, but they typically also do it on one of the evenings of the IAC conference. Great, Chloé. It's been a pleasure. Again, I hope to see you in Dubai, and all the best for you and for the Galactic Chloé show.
Thank you very much, Raphael, and congratulations for everything that you do as well in this podcast. It's how we can get the word out there and get people interested in space.
Thanks, Chloé. Well, that's it for another nominal episode of the Space Business Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, such as iTunes. You can follow us on Twitter at podcast_space. Also consider supporting us at www.patreon.com/spacebusinesspodcast. If the podcast got you interested in learning more about the business opportunities in the space economy, check out my new online course on space entrepreneurship on udemy.com. The link is in the episode description. Lastly, if you have any feedback, including ideas for guests, and that may include yourself if you have an exciting space story to tell, or interested in being a sponsor, drop us an email at spacebusinesspodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to seeing you for the next episode.